Greeting, dear friends. Wishing you a good evening. We are together again, in the 35th week of the Divine Order and the Universe Reading and Commentary Series.
Welcome, dear friends. Good evening to you all.
This evening, we will be going deeper into the topic of essence knowledge, into the question of how and when all these impressions we acquired from the events we experienced are transformed into essence knowledge. And of course, when I say events we experience, nowadays it seems like we never have a dull moment, as though we live 1 year's worth of events within a week, sometimes within a day. We are under a never-ending torrent of the events and moreover, of the news about those events. Of course, our spiritual teachers, Mr. Ruhselman and Mr. Erikdal, had said many times that as this learning milieu we call Earth gets near to the graduation date, each being, corporeal or non-corporeal, feels the haste more and more. I sometimes use such metaphors like this world is a school and there are students that attend the classes in person, and also students don't take the classes but still have to sit for the final exam. So, all of us, all beings are working hard to finish this term, more correctly, world cycle.
Thankfully, with each reading, this book reveals itself layer by layer, and we discover and learn the knowledge it contains for utilizing and applying in our daily life. Because, as you just said, in the final analysis, all of us will be tested by this question: how did we apply all that knowledge in our life? Of course, here, we, as the commentators and you, as the readers and audience of the Divine Order and the Universe, each week we invite sublimating influences into our organism, and this encourages us to apply that knowledge into our life more and more, of course, depending our own individual capacity and scope, and this also speeds up the emergence of the events, and our adaptation rate increases more and more.
Yes, we are born to this world, as the bodies are beings built for this lifetime, and we must give the world's due. Matter's due. You know, this book's first sentence is about matter, and we read that even the states we deem as sublime and spiritual are of matter. Yes, it was a shock to our mental and emotional comfort zones. We had to give up, leave, abandon or cancel many of our previous beliefs and judgments related to matter that we had been identified with. Now, we know that our beings build bodies in the crude matter of our universe to experience matter, to transform matter, to make it more developed. And in the previous weeks, we read that impressive sentence many times. Ferment of being is comprehension. If the whole universe is matter, then, we cannot wish to leave our bodies as soon as possible anymore, because we now know that, building this body of ours, becoming born into this world is an indication of the state our being reached in its journey of development. In other words, our current body is our most precious body we have, our current life is our most precious lifetime we have. In short, no matter how many troubles and hardships we have, we still must appreciate the value of life. Yes, let's start reading from the page we stopped last week. Essence knowledge comprises deep impressions, which cannot be comprehended by mankind, that are attained by comparison, by discernment of the assets belonging to the past lives starting from the most primitive cycle with previous assets, and which are appropriated by the being, not by man. As, on the one hand, they ensure the evolution of the spirit to which they serve with the forms of comprehension, on the other hand, they widen the being's field of development by preparing ground for new knowledge. These assets are gained by situations within the world comprehension technique. It is possible to collect these situations within the concept of an event. Man lives in the midst of the events surrounding him, he becomes the hero of those events. In some cases, he does not live it himself but follows and observes the situations of other people and beings living in them with a keen interest. So, because of the necessities of their lives in the world, the relations belonging to the event combinations either mankind directly live in or indirectly see in others are the whole sum of the knowledge which are expressed by world comprehension, and these concepts are separate from essence knowledge and the materials becoming vehicles for the constitution of essence knowledge. However, the conclusions and impressions of these, after they go through various mechanisms in the spatium life following death, are transferred to the essence being and are appropriated by the being as essence knowledge. And consciousness, as previously explained, continues to collect new knowledge materials from the world by directly encountering the crude realities of the world, more correctly, these events. After stating the differences in this way between essence knowledge and events which are evaluated as knowledge in the world, we will continue our explanation by using the meaning of the word knowledge, without mistaking these.
Yes, in this passage, we read more about the mechanism of the essence knowledge. And again, the book states the differences between this and the events we acquire knowledge and information from as we live in them. In order for us to become well-knowledged in the world, our most important tool is the events, but not each detail of the knowledge we gained in the world is transformed into essence knowledge. Last week, we discussed this. The daily processing of the knowledge we gain as we live our life is done as we sleep, through the dream mechanism, and these are pushed to the unconscious. However, everything stored in the unconscious throughout a lifetime is to be transformed into essence knowledge only when our body dies and our being becomes isolated in the spatium state, for the great accounting that happens after death. Then, in that state, the knowledge restored in the unconscious is pushed to the subconscious, a closed system where the filtered and processed knowledge from the previous lifetimes of our being, and there, the knowledge from the last lifetime is compared with the knowledge from the previous lifetimes. Only after this comparison and filtering, the deep impressions of the last lifetime of ours are processed or transformed into essence knowledge. And this conclusion, if another incarnation is necessary for our being, becomes the base of the next life plan to be outlined by our being and the beings in duty. As you see, this conclusion of this great accounting period in the spatium state is very important in regard to the next body or lifetime the being will have, if necessary. This conclusion will color and shape the next life plan. We will encounter events with that disposition. In the line of the decisions we make in the spatium state we shape our next life plan. In other words, what we had experienced and concluded in our past lifetimes makes up a very encompassing structure, shaping and coloring what we will experience. Yes, because of this, each and every experience we have in the world is precious for us because each of them is a helpful factor in the development of our being, as well as ourself. Please remember that this development is two-sided. And, as you mentioned, events come faster and faster. I don't know, do you have a day without anything happening at all? No, be it inner or outer, there are so many things happening all the time. And the events of this period and towards this world cycle's end, we experience these events so deeply or at multi-levels that, I am sure their deep impressions will be beneficial for our beings. Yes, of course, most of the time, we whine and complain about the hardships, but if we can try remembering the knowledge we read here, if we can remember that all of these happen due to the needs of our being, then, maybe we can shift our way of dealing with these hardships. And we can begin to look at events from a pragmatic angle, with some awareness like, yes, this is good for my and my being's development. We cannot be sure which impression will become essence knowledge, of course, but just reminding ourselves to be open for experiencing many things may be beneficial. Of course, I don't mean that we must experience everything and anything. Each of us has a conscience mechanism within us, and we make choices or decisions depending on our capacity for discernment between two opposite sides of this mechanism. The easiest shortcut can be to say, I intend to live this world life in a most efficient and productive manner as much as possible, and then keep on experiencing events as they come.
Yes, the emphasis in the first sentence of this passage is very important. Essence knowledge comprises deep impressions, which are appropriated by the being, not by man. Yes, we mentioned that we do daily accounting of the events and experiences we had in a day during sleep, in our dreams. Because, when our body is more or less out of the equation while we sleep, our unconscious becomes freer to be in contact with my being, our spiritual side. Otherwise, during so-called awake part of our day, we actually are asleep in regard to the automatisms we think and act by. We don't have complete comprehension within this material system. At best, we can think and act more or less semi-comprehendingly. Yes, these deep impressions of the lifetimes a being had are stored in the subconscious. It is a closed system. We cannot access to the memories of all those past lives. This happens rarely, if such a recalling is necessary for the development of that being. And all those deep impressions of all past lifetimes are stored in the subconscious. When the body dies, because the brain cells beings, as a magnetic field synthesis remain gathered and still storing that subconscious material. When the being needs to build another body for the next lifetime, some influences regarding the incomplete parts of the previous life plans are also included in the next life plan that will appear as sequences of causes and effects. Because of this, we reap in our current lifetime what we sow in one of those previous lifetimes. That's why these lifetimes do not necessarily follow each other in a chronological line. As tough, the being revisits the subconscious to check the stored knowledge to find out the blanks or the incomplete parts so these can be included in the next life plan to be filled or complete. You know, when people need regression therapy sessions, it is mostly because they have physical and mental problems that cannot be explained or treated by the medicine, and when they relive the related past lifetime experiences during a session, many times they see that in the previous lifetime they had wasted their life either because some traumatic dynamics, or because of fears. And the greatest regrets people feel as they die are all about the not lived parts of their lifetimes. Then the question is, how not to waste our life? Well, we must get out of our shells and go into the events, go into relations with others. The all kinds of daily life events. Yes, there are many things you like and want to have. And also, many things you don't like and don't want to have. Yes, we can make mistakes, we can fall, but as we read in the divine order and the universe, this is not a punishment or we will be punished because of mistakes. No, we will stand up and we will apply what we learn from our mistakes, that is, we will choose better next time. As we face such inner and outer challenges more, the experiences we gain create all those cause and effect spirals that takes us from one point to another. Therefore, the more we are engaged and involved in with life we are given, the better we can give its due. And this book gently encourages us to be more involved with our own life by underlining its importance.
Yes. Let's say something happened and we reacted. Later, when we feel calmer and even, as we look calmer, such a great activity occurs within us, assessing our reaction, deciding on if it was too much or too little or proper, unconsciously comparing our recent reaction to the previous reactions under similar conditions, justifying or rationalizing our reaction, etc. Why this activity occurs? Because that event and our reaction to it has disrupted the balance, the equilibrium of the conscience mechanism, and our duality unit seeks to restore balance. Eventually, some learning occurs, and actually, we have no idea if this learning, as you said, filling up an old or previous blank or completing an unfinished business.
Nowadays, there is such a fast activity in our outer world as well. I mean, compared to, let's say, a few centuries ago when humans had not such advanced communication technologies, they might have felt the passing of time as slow. However, now the events, impressions, information, experiences are torrential, but I think we don't set aside enough time to assess these with awareness so we can bring out some learnings out of them. Events come, but the impressions we need to get out of these events either remain undigested or ignored because immediately next event comes. I think we must take some pauses from time to digest them as much as we can. In the chat box, I see some questions about karma. You cannot see this word in the divine order and the universe. This book states cause and effect chains. If there is something I couldn't complete or finish in the past lifetimes, this whole system supports me by providing me with opportunities through the mechanisms of time and destiny so I can meet the beings, situations and factors that were included in the past event. And the need to complete that unfinished business is for the continuation of our being's development, because our being is in service for the evolution of our spirit by widening its comprehension. One of our friends commented as, "Each mistake on the loom brings out a new pattern." Well, His words made me visualize life as an embroidery tambour. The top surface of the fabric stretched by the loops of the tambour is our space, our spot, and there is an outline of a pattern, our life plan that will be revealed. By the proper and destined conjunction of time and space, we take this tambour and in accordance with the necessities of time and with our own pace of development, we begin the needlework on the outline in the fabric. At first, this is a hard task. Needle pricks and pierces our fingertips, we suffer, until we get more experienced, more mindful, and faster. At the initial states, we make inexperienced stitches, even we are pushed to put the needle on the fabric, up and down, because at the initial states of humankind, the intervention of the beings in duty is larger, they direct us to a certain outcome by automatisms. And now, after, let's say 100 or 500 lifetimes later, as this world school's closing day is getting closer, the pattern in the fabric is more or less visible. We can see it now more clearly. And please don't understand this metaphor of pattern as your life purpose. Many times, I hear people asking about their life purpose, but they expect to hear or find something very lofty, etc. However, the learnings you just mentioned may be our life purpose, just adding some missing colors to the pattern in the fabric of life, and yes, some of the stitches may be wrong, but according to whom or what? We know that our being is built within a system that allows mistakes, otherwise 500 to 700 lifetimes would not be necessary. I mean, sometimes we cannot finish the whole pattern on the tambour, this or that part or corner remains unfinished, let's say, because of laziness, indifference, etc. in one or several past lifetimes. Then, because of the regrets and remorse, or because of the pressure of necessities, a being in beings in duty to its life plan may outline a life plan that includes the possibilities of finishing many unfinished businesses in a single lifetime. Then, we see some fellow human beings who shoulder many burdens as they live, as if they wish to finish the pattern at a single sitting.
Yes, and that's why the variety and the richness of the colors in the tapestry of life. All colors, all shapes, all kinds of materials, all kinds of patterns. Everything is possible for us.
Yes, as long as we move or act to stitch a color, a line, in short, to spend an effort. Yes, in this crude matter, things don't happen easily. It takes a certain period of time because we have the superficial time comprehension. However, in the semi-subtle realms that is called as the plan of love, we will be embroidering the patterns more easily, faster. Because, we will be manifesting what we imagine. Also, our beings will not need these tumultuous births and deaths. But now, we are here, in this world, and we are subject to the time and spatial conditions of this level of matter. In short, that needle will prick us time to time. Yet, as we widen our comprehension, well, this metaphor is getting larger, our widening comprehension is like a thimble. A kind of protection that happens as we get more experienced, life stops hurting us as it used to do. We deal with the challenges with more efficacy, or agency. Well, this evening we progress with metaphors. So, let's say, this is the thimble of awareness. Alright, let's continue reading. To make the study of knowledge belonging the world easier, as a simile, we can call the direct ones, that is, the ones acquired by living in the midst of events, stem knowledge, and the indirect ones, that is, the ones acquired by observing others, branch knowledge, both of which are powerful vehicles, causing the development of essence knowledge according to their capacities. For example, if the knowledge a child gains who puts his hand in a fire by feeling the pain of the burn himself is the stem knowledge, the knowledge he gains by observing the suffering and reactions that occur out of his friends burning his hand becomes branch knowledge. And by this example, we have said that stem knowledge will give shortcut results in comparison with branch knowledge in the constitution of essence knowledge. On the other hand, there is no possibility of mankind living each event by themselves and gaining only direct knowledge. So, the shortages arising out of this impossibility are complemented with branch knowledge.
Just as we discussed, there is such a richness and abundance of possibilities in this world that it is impossible to gain first-hand experience of each event and acquire direct knowledge of all. So, we read here that STEM knowledge is the knowledge we gain from the events we experience firsthand. And branch knowledge is the indirect knowledge we gain by observing others, and this is why we need to be in the midst of life, within the web of connections and relations to others. And as we mentioned previously, because of the communication technologies and the social media platforms, the amount of STEM knowledge increases every day. One of our friends asks, how we can detect STEM and branch knowledge in our daily life. Well, let's look at our life. Something has happened to someone or someone reacted to something in a certain way, and we observed this as a bystander or a person involved with that someone, and we learned and internalized some decision or information from this event. This is an indirect learning, hence, the branch knowledge. For the STEM knowledge, the best way to look at our life to see the repeating patterns experienced firsthand by us, the more or less similar events that keep on happening to us. This is an indication of something we need to learn firsthand, so it can be a STEM knowledge for us. However, because of various reasons, when we don't get the lesson at the first event, then events with similar settings, conditions, and persons keep on happening to us. The problem of not learning the lesson at the first instance is we begin to blame external factors as such events repeat and become a pattern in our lifetime. This blaming directs us to choose from, and consequently, to add values to the earthly cravings side of our duality unit. Then, we become deeply identified with those kinds of events and we lose ourselves within those events, and getting the lesson those events repeatedly bring to us gets harder and harder. Yet, because such pattern or patterns become too obvious, they also give us a big clue to what to do about this, and if we can, we take a step out of this identification and look at our situation from outside, as an observer, then the initial lesson and also the reasons or excuses preventing us to learn it in the first instance get clear for us. And this is a multi-layered learning. Actually, such deep learning turns into knowing. Of course, tests and trials of life continue, but if a similar event happens, this knowing shields us from falling into the previous identification trap. So, we think, choose and act in a freer manner, because this knowing is like a permanent record in our system, as though in a more suitable manner to transform into essence knowledge more easily. Yes, please study and examine your own lifetime to find out repeating patterns and also the concepts, ideas, and memories that have a strong hold over you. You will find in them many lessons of the STEM knowledge, waiting to be discovered and learnt.
One of our friends asks, how do we know that we transformed this knowledge? Who assess this? Well, we will not attract the same type of events anymore. Because we learnt the lesson such events contain, even if we encounter such event patterns again, we are now stronger in dealing with this, and we will go through such events with ease. This is because we now feel more integrated, and this inner state is like a leverage, it elevates us to a higher level, to a higher ground. So, these are the indications we can look for. And you asked, who assess this? Well, there are two ways of assessing. First one is the daily or periodical accounting we humans make during sleep and in certain phases of our lifetime. Assessments we do in our dreams. That conscientious assessments we do from time to time, etc. The second, but the most important assessing is done after death. We had discussed this accounting done in the spatium phase. Yes, throughout in our lifetime in the world, we live intertwined with the influences coming from our essence being. And we must remember that in both ways of accounting, the beings in duty are always involved because at times and instances we cannot act with the proper degree of comprehension. They intervene to orient the events and conditions towards us, the events and conditions that contain the possibilities of the desired results towards the events. We had read and discussed the cadres of duty in our previous videos. So, let me kindly remind you to watch these. In short, all those conjunctions are governed by the cadres in duty. Let's not forget that, As it is emphasized many times in the divine order and the universe, nothing happens accidentally in our universe.
Our process of learning is not much different than the example of the child we read in this passage. Hot stove burns his hand and he receives an information. After a few repeats of this event, the child learns, and begins to check the stove by putting his fingers closer without touching. If hot, the child does not touch it. Likewise, some events are like this hot stove. At first, we get burns, and our suffering experience may become a branch knowledge for others around us. Later we begin to check the conditions and elements of the events so we don't react and get burned. It takes time, but we learn.
Yes, we can say that everything we learn by learning cause and effect chains between events, by understanding causality, make a ground for the essence knowledge. Because, even if the child learns that touching a hot stove burns his hand, this knowledge is not yet included or added to the essence knowledge of his being. The worldly knowledge, both the stem and the branch knowledge we acquire at this human stage, become stored in the unconscious, until the processes after death begin. Let's continue reading. As knowledge feeds essence knowledge, in between there are some assisting principles that provide strengthening, and one of these is the causality principle. In the universe, no event is without a cause. All events, relations, influencing, integrations, transitions, disintegrations of universe, in short, all formations, transformations and deformations of matter occur in accordance with the necessities of the great evolutionary cause, and as the cause and effect of each other and as interconnected. And this is a manifestation of the great causality principle in universe. After all, as we state at every point of this book, all motions are based on causes and arrive at effects. No occurrence without a cause and effect can be thought of. Mechanisms belonging to the integration and disintegration of all relations in the universe work in accordance with this principle. No event is unattended and self-contained. Every event is connected to other events, directly or indirectly. In this way, the whole universe with all of its parts is woven with an immense network of connection, and the knot points of these connections are the cause, effect necessities of the causality principle. Each event is the effect of the higher one and the cause of the lower one. Of whichever event the cause is unseen, this is because the cause of that event has not been known.
Yes, the book reminds us how incredibly complex the workings of the universal mechanisms. This time, explaining the causality principle, this mechanism of cause and effect, which is one of the fundamental principles. We read in this passage that, even if we see or don't see this, there is a chain of causes and effects behind everything. Well, from this level of our current level of consciousness, seeing a large part of such a chain may not be possible for us. You know, there are some well-known examples we frequently use. An ant among the grass cannot see the whole prairie, but an eagle flying over it has more perception of the prairie and even beyond it. Of course, seeing such lengths of this causality chains requires a very wide perspective, and as we live our lifetime with a mostly automatic and partially more or less semi-comprehending manner, we may not have such a wide perspective. Still, we can gain an awareness that everything is always connected to each other on a chain of cause and effect. In short, we may not see what is connected to what in this immense and encompassing network, but we can know that everything is subject to this causality principle, and the effects we experience now are caused by the choices and acts made in the far and near past, and the choices and acts we will do now are going to be the causes of future effects we will experience. And please don't think that such choices and acts must be big and impressive. Let's say, one day, a friend calls while we are busy. We hesitate for a moment as we decide to choose from the duty side of our conscience mechanism and answer his or her call. We talk. A trivial chat, some small talk. Then we say goodbye and forget about this event. Days or months or even years later, this friend calls again and thanks us, saying, "That day, you said this and gave me such hope that things changed for me. It was the thing I needed to hear, etc." Sometimes, we are that friend, saying this because we heard a word and reframed our understanding because of it. The causality principle is prevalent even behind such tiny cause and effect chains. Therefore, even having an awareness of this divine mechanism, working always behind every event is beneficial, as we try to widen our perspective more and more.
As Carl Jung's naming, synchronicities, that is, meaningful coincidences. When we understand that seemingly coincidences are not coincidences at all but some components that are connected to another components of the divine chain link that allows such an order that at each knot points of this immense web, the needs of the beings are met with the possibilities of matter without any conflict. And, as you said, we are like those ants, we cannot see those knot points and protest, saying, "What have I done to deserve this?" Just like the Sufi story about Moses and Al-Qadr, Al-Qadr sinks a boat, takes down a wall etc. and Moses cannot comprehend the reasons of seemingly evil deeds. In this story, Al-Qadr symbolizes a plan with duty that has a wider perspective regarding cause and effect mechanism, and Moses symbolizes the human at the world reality that has a narrow perspective regarding causality principle. Alright, let's continue reading. The causality principle is a strong support of the knowledge of comparison which is used by comprehension that takes the most significant role in the transformation of events into essence knowledge. After giving this short explanation of the causality principle, it would be helpful to mention the reciprocal situations of comprehension and the knowledge of comparison. Knowledge of comparison is the way of adapting comprehension to the causality principle. Comprehension develops as much as it is able to adapt to the causality principle in universe. Comprehension that remains alienated from the causality principle displays that much deficiency in consigning and appreciating the endless relations that exist among the endless combinations in universe and remains accordingly in backward and simple states. To a child who cannot comprehend that his hand will burn if he puts his hand in a fire, the authorization to play with fire is not given. This is because his comprehension has not yet attained the merit for such a deed. His comprehension has not yet adapted properly to the causality principle belonging to the relations of this matter. And the thing that will allow this adaptation will be his knowledge of comparison. For that child to enter the knowledge of comparison, he will experiment a few times to hold fire in his hand, and his hand will get burnt each time. Each time his hand is burnt, some intuitions about the causes and effects belonging to the relation of fire and hand will gradually emerge, and with the help of his knowledge of comparisons, these intuitions will become knowledge. In this way, the comprehension and consequently content of essence knowledge will increase. We call this procedure refining experience.
Yes, we read in this passage, again, expressions that will guide us. We see the emphasis made on the knowledge of comparison that adapts our comprehension to the causality principle. And the level of development we reached allows us to compare the knowledge of events because we have an innate duality mechanism within our structure. So, we can see things from both sides of this mechanism. Let's give an extreme example. As I walk home, I see two persons fighting. As a witness to this event, I may have a fair idea about the possible results of involving and possible the results of non-involving, because either I already have first-hand experience or observations about similar events. I already have information about the probable consequences of some choices I can make and act upon, to help the victim, to call police, to stop the fight or to join the fight. Should I intervene this fight? Or should I keep my distance and ask for help from others? Now, imagine the speed of the decision-making process within us. We have such a capacity of comprehension that we can have a knowledge of comparison among these possible results within seconds, even nanoseconds. We may not have an awareness of this capacity and fast processing at the heat of the event, but later, in hindsight, as we analyze the stages of the event, stages of our decision-making, stages of our choosing from this or that side of the conscience mechanism, then we can observe or have an awareness about the knowledge of comparisons that swift working within us. With this awareness and intuitions we gain about this mechanism, our learnings transform into knowing and consequently, becomes added to essence knowledge, as refining experiences. And please notice that the book does not state this as positive, that is negative. No, on the contrary, we read that we live by the duality mechanism, so even each situation, state and event caused by the choices and acts done from the earthly cravings are tools for acquiring further refining experiences.
One of our friends asked, should someone diagnosed with a terminal illness or is infected with a deadly virus evaluate his or her situation within a chain of cause and effect? Of course, because many times, behind such illnesses, there are psychosomatic causes. I mean, our emotions, beliefs, our reactions to the events we experience, especially our resistance to change. We lose parts of our magnetic field in traumatic events, and this weakens our natural wholeness. There are many examples of people who discovered the root causes of their terminal illnesses by various methods of exploration and recovered, of course, because such remissions of tumors or total recovery became destined for them. Such diseases and illnesses, in that sense, are warnings for us to open our eyes, to wake up to the necessity of changing our habitual way of living. Now, as the whole world, we are living through this pandemic, and of course, as a necessity of the communal development of humankind, this virus is a global result of the myriad causes we activated in the far and near past. And, right now, with the lessons we are learning or ignoring, with the choices and decisions we are making, we will cause new results in the near and far future. So far, all of us witnessed the events caused by the decisions made at the both sides of the conscience mechanism. At the earthly craving side, we heard the news of people producing fake vaccines, fighting at the supermarkets over toilet paper rolls, etc. And at the duty side, we learn about the medical staff, doctors, nurses, as well as ambulance drivers, essential workers who kept on working selflessly, without seeing their families for weeks, who kept on working without the proper equipment. On the global scale, we saw the decisions made by the governments from both sides. Some acted from power and territorial concerns, some acted for the well-being of their citizens. And of course, all those acts and deeds activated new cause and effect chains that we will encounter their results sooner or later. And we will continue live these results, individually and communally, and will continue to acquire worldly knowledge. And now, after reading this and previous passages, we understand that only some deep impressions of all those knowledge and information we acquire will transform into essence knowledge.
Diseases and illnesses are important factors, in the sense of providing a person with the possibilities of self-development. Because at such period of life, we are more easily turn within, study our inner world, where we become more emphatic with the diseases of others and eventually may turn to healing practices to help his or herself and others. Actually, I am one of those persons. The disease of a loved one in my family directed me towards the healing practices and methods. To be able to help that person, I felt the need of learning. For many people, periods of illness and diseases bring the opportunities of learning to ask for help, to receive help from others, etc. For the persons around the patient, such periods may provide learning about altruism, selflessness, deep caring, etc. In general, I can say that such periods bring us the transformative lessons of adapting the changes in life, be it gradual or sudden. And also, of course, we learn, as a first-hand experience, the value of a healthy body. And I think either we gain the stem knowledge of this fact through the experiences we personally live, or the branch knowledge of this fact as we witness what others experience during this pandemic, or whenever we need to go to a hospital and see other patients and their families, etc. The preciousness of our body, as the worldly vehicle of our being. I think we really got this lesson this time.
Another question came. Is the knowledge of comparison an infinite process? Or will this end at the plan of duty or at the unitary? I think the answer lies in the description given in this book. Comprehension develops as much as it is able to adapt to the causality principle in universe. Here, the book talks about a state. In consigning and appreciating the endless relations that exist among the endless combinations in universe. If we remember the passages about the duality principle and how the duality becomes less prevalent starting from the initial steps of the plan of duty and ends at the unitary, we can say that knowledge of comparison continues endlessly, because the book mentions it as working among the endless combinations in universe. However, there must be a difference between the knowledge of comparison at the plan of duty and the knowledge of comparison at our human stage. Let us ask you this time. What is this difference? Of course, the difference of comprehension.
Even when we encounter the same event, each of us experiences this event in his or her own way, own perspective, through his or her mental and emotional imagery. Why this difference is among us? Because when we analyze an event with the knowledge of comparison, we also use the essence knowledge, and again, this is different for each of us. This is why, as we evaluate an event, no matter how close we are, for example, like members of a family, a daughter's perspective is different than her mother's, etc. Because of this fact, I like to hear the perspective of others to compare with mine so I can understand the differences between us, because I cannot see from my brother's or mother's perspective, and if I don't know anything about theirs, then I may tend to assume my perspective as the one and only perspective. So, when I learn about theirs, I can gain more impressions about that event. In a way, I widen my perspective by adding others' perspectives to mine.
Thank you, dear Sister Oya, for sharing this useful method as a closure for this evening's discussions. Wishing you all a good week, dear friends. We hope to see you next week.
Good evening, dear friends. Hoping to see you all next week.